Hi everyone and welcome back to my booktube channel, Lise in Bookland, and this is my February 2024 reading wrap up. So I actually bounced back really well this month and I read so many great books, so I was really excited to see such a big pile at the end and just have finally managed to carve out a bit more time for reading than I had in previous months. So I did read quite a good mix, I think. I always say that, and sometimes it's not actually true. I realise when I'm talking through it. But this time I did read a memoir, non-fiction, sport non-fiction nonetheless, and a contemporary novel, so that's quite diverse for me really. So yeah, the first book I'm going to mention is The Blind Astronomer's Daughter by John Pipkin. I was not expecting to love this book as much as I did. It is a real chunk of a book. It does take a while to get into it because it is quite heavy in some places with like the astronomy detail. I suppose it's quite a good title, but what attracted me to this book when I saw it in the shop was the description that it was set in 18th century Ireland, which is a setting that I love but haven't read a lot of at all. So anything that I see like that I'm going to pick up straight away. But probably the main character is called Caroline Ainsworth, and her father is so, at the start of the book, her father is so obsessed with astronomy that he ends up looking at the sun through a telescope and blinds himself. But then we go back in time to when she was born and how she grows up with this interest in astronomy, being around her father, and also a very formidable intellect in her own right. So they're working in Ireland, and those are fictitious characters, but then it also follows William and Caroline Herschel, who spend most of the book in or near Bath. So they are real historical figures, a brother and sister, and the brother is most famous for having discovered Uranus, and the sister was a good astronomer in her own right as well, discovering lots of comets and things. So yeah, I just really enjoyed reading about them as well. So it was so nice to read about these man-woman teams of scientists, and like neither of them were married couples. I just thought that was really refreshing. But as well as them, then we do follow more normal people, I suppose. So principally the tenants of the Ainsworth, who actually hold some family secrets that I won't go into. In particular, one man called Fionn, whose father is a blacksmith, and they actually get involved with like making things for the Ainsworths for the astronomy experiments that they're doing. So yeah, it's just such a spread of a story, and in the 18th century Ireland, obviously a lot of unrest, and it does bring you right up to 1798, but I would say that that's a very small part of the novel really compared to everything else that goes on and compared to the astronomy. And I maybe didn't feel like that was like 100% as well done as the rest of the book, but I still really did enjoy it. So I believe John Pipkin only has one other novel called Woodsburner or something, which I would definitely be interested in reading if I ever find it. So definitely, if you are interested in like the Age of Enlightenment or science or astronomy, this is definitely one for you. It's fascinating like how old a science it is really. You know, at the time that this book is set, they only knew about five planets, because they're the ones you can see in the naked eye in the sky. So like the Greeks and Romans knew about those, but yeah, obviously this is where like lenses are starting to be developed more, and advanced lenses that you can see further into the sky, and people starting to try to understand how big the universe is. So I just thought it was an amazing book. Really, really enjoyed it. So from that on to another very exciting book. So you know, if I see a book with a ship on it, I'm going to look at it in a shop. I actually just got this in like one of those newsagents where there was 3 books for a tenner, 2 of which are in this wrap up, so that's a really good sign. But I couldn't leave this one behind. Leeward by Katie Dayish, and what was exciting about this book is that it was a book about ships by a woman. That's the first one that I've read. I really don't know, I think there are that many out there. The other thing that differentiates this book about is it's kind of funny because it's nearly marketed as a romance in the back, like, you know, that the Captain Hiram Nightingale, which is a great name, is gay, and you know, he obviously struggles with that in the 18th century world that this book is set in. It's set in 1798, so just after the Battle of the Nile. It's obviously a differentiating factor, but that's actually such a small part of the book, which I really like. it's really just a book about an adventure on the high seas. I just absolutely love that for the author. But I obviously really did enjoy the romance part as well, and I thought that was really well done. It was just really, really slow, but this is the first in a trilogy, so yeah, maybe it'll be a bigger part of the next two books, but I do hope she keeps the other stuff in as well, because I thought it was brilliant. I have to say there's great Aero Ace representation in this book as well, which I really appreciated. So Captain Nightingale, after the Battle of the Nile, his first lieutenant, who he's very close to, is killed, and he obviously has a lot of PTSD issues over that, so he takes 1 or 2 years out, and eventually he has to go back into the service. He's given command of this ship to go and try and find this other ship that has a mutiny has taken place on. So yeah, so it's about him trying to, how he gets on trying to take over a new command with the new crew he has, and yeah, and also just what's going on in that ship. So yeah, it was just really great characters, great historical details. So I'm so happy to have discovered this trilogy at the start rather than finding it years later, as I have with all of the other seagoing books that I have found so far. And the one thing I could say really is I think maybe more could have been done with the other crew on the ship, but like there's only so much you could do in one book, so I'm hoping that will come in time, because you did kind of get glimpses into some of the seamen or like his coxswain or something, but they didn't really have stories of their own, so it would have been nice to get a bit more detail on that, but maybe that's to come. So a book I actually bought online because I've been wanting to read this for ages, and I was kind of in an Anne of Green Gables mood there about a month ago, and I just finally caved, and I've not been able to find this in any shop, so I just caved and bought it off Blackwell's, I think. It took ages to arrive, but this is Marilla of Green Gables by Sarah McCoy. So this is like a prequel to the Anne of Green Gables series, if you like. I am always hesitant with these, just because, I don't know, I suppose you'd always be a bit wary that they might be like not well written or something, especially when they're not readily available. But I'm happy to say that I definitely can say this about this book. It's really well written, and I have always loved Marilla, so I was really happy to learn more of her story, and obviously we do get kind of glimpses into her past in the Anne books. For a woman of her time, it always will be a question of why she didn't marry, and you get that glimpse that maybe she had a past relationship with Gilbert Blythe's father. So that's what this book covers really, as well as how Marilla kind of becomes involved in like the ladies' age of the time, so she kind of starts to get more like feminist ideas. That was really the one thing, unfortunately, that I would say really didn't ring true to me really well. And it's kind of funny, you can see me there checking the publication date, and that's because I thought maybe it would have been influenced by Anne with an E, but like, to be fair, this came before Anne with an E, so that's nice to know. But I think it would still be a really enjoyable read for anybody that does love Anne of Green Gables, as I do. My main quibble with it really was, I think too many of Anne's traits were given to Marilla, when I think they are very different people. Like, two different people that obviously in the Anne books learn to love each other very much, but just not they're very different characters, and I don't believe that all of that was just due to Marilla's age or like being battered by life. I think they just fundamentally are different. So I think it did a disservice to Marilla to give her too many of Anne's characteristics and even speech patterns. So yeah, I just thought that could have been done differently, but still an enjoyable read. I also this month read a more traditional romance novel, I suppose you would say, and that's Bringing Down the Duke by Evie Dunmore. So I had heard of this series. It's a series called I can't remember what the series is called, A League of Extraordinary Gentlewomen or something like that. And it had kind of been on my radar, and I just saw it come up on Audible, and I was looking for something easy to read, so I downloaded it, and it is a really enjoyable romance. It's set in 1890s Oxford, and it follows this character that kind of makes a bargain with her brother that she will be able to accept this scholarship to go to Oxford, to one of the new women's colleges. So I mentioned a long few videos ago that I was kind of on the lookout for novels that were set in like Oxford women's colleges in like the early 1900s, and yeah, yeah, this is exactly what I was looking for, kind of. Like, the one, like, it is a romance book. The one criticism I'd have to say is, like, I would have loved more insight into the academia part and how that worked for the women, but obviously that's not what this book was about, which is fine. As a romance, I did enjoy it, even though it wouldn't be my, like, favourite romance of all time, but it was nice that the leads were a little bit older, they were both kind of over 30. The premise of it really is the character, I cannot remember her name, I wish I'd written it down. Her scholarship is actually from, like, the suffragettes. There's a big suffragette strand running through it as well, which is really cool. But yeah, they're, like, giving out leaflets outside the House of Commons in London to try and publicise the suffragette movement, and, like, she ends up giving one to this duke, and then all the other suffragettes think she might have an in with him, and he is quite lonely, so you can kind of guess where that goes in the end. It was a very realistic portrayal of, like, how a relationship like that would have worked at the time and all the challenges that they'd face, so I thought that was nice. Yeah, so I did really enjoy it. It didn't stick in my head too much, but I'll definitely read the rest of the series. I think it all kind of follows the same group of suffragettes and their different storylines, so we've already been introduced to the heroines of the subsequent books through this novel, which is nice as well. I actually bought this book with the intention of reading it for the Irish Readathon, but it arrived in, I don't know, January or something, and I couldn't wait that long, basically. So that is Across the Divide by Brian Gallagher, which is a children's book. So it starts off in a feis, which is like a kind of Irish music competition for children, and there's two children, Nora and Liam, and I love their names because when we learn Irish as a language in Ireland, and we'd have to, like, write stories or letters, as part of exams and things. And one advice that a teacher gave me one time, which I used until my very last exam in Irish, was that you should always name your characters Liam and Nora because they're suitably Irish. I hope this has changed a little bit and you can name your characters whatever you want, but back when I did my junior cert, leaving cert, they were suitably Irish names, but for names that begin with certain letters, if it depending on how the name is being used, you might need to add a H called a shevu or an uru onto the start of the name. So Liam and Nora are just very uncomplicated names, so it takes one bit off your head so that you don't need to worry about it in the exam. So it's almost like I wrote this book, but I obviously didn't. So anyways, Liam and Nora are at the feis. Nora is from kind of a wealthy enough background, and Liam is from a more working class background. I really loved kind of the choice of characters here because like, I suppose in, like, early 20th century Dublin, the Protestant ascendancy had kind of gone as a really critical factor in Irish society, but there was this, like, up and coming middle class of, like, Irish Catholics, especially in Dublin, so it was just really cool to see that represented here. But anyways, Nora has forgotten her music, and Liam is singing the same song, so he gives her his, and just a little friendship draws up between them there. But this is all against the background of the 1913 lockout, where there were lots of trade union strikes in Dublin for better conditions for workers, kind of all led by James Connolly. Liam's family really believes in this, and Nora is obviously from the other side, and her father's business is actually impacted by this. So it really, really has serious North and South vibes, like, not obviously the romance part, but I think if you love the friendship in North and South, as I do, between Margaret and Bessie, and the Higginses, you'll really enjoy this book. And I just loved the way it was a story about friendship, really. Like, Nora obviously is conscious of their differences in status and wealth, but she is always thinking about how she can help Liam without it being, like, patronising, and I think there's, like, lessons in that for anybody, really. Yeah, so I just really, really enjoyed this book. I'm actually reading another of his books at the moment, another of his children's books, but it's not an author. Now, I know I've a long way to come with Irish authors, but it's not an author I'd heard any other books from before. But when I looked into his back catalogue, there's so many that I do want to hear. She has a book called Stormclouds, which is in the Northern Ireland during the turbulent summer of 1969. Secrets and Shadows, a spy novel that begins with the North Strand bombings during the Second World War, taking sides about the Irish Civil War. And he also has two books that are set during the Irish War of Independence, all for adults, so I'll definitely be looking up those as soon as I possibly can. I don't think I'll fit them in the Irish Readathon, but later in the year for sure. So next up then is historical fiction, my second Robert Harris V2, and I absolutely loved this book. I picked up another Robert Harris cheap in a charity shop when I was in Dublin recently, and I definitely can't wait to read more of him. So this book is set in 1944, and it follows two characters, Kay Carton Walsh and Rudy Graff. Kay is a WAF, Women's Auxiliary Air Force, who gets sent to newly liberated Belgium, who gets sent to try and prevent the damage that these rockets are causing, the German rockets. Then Rudy Graff is one of the engineers that's actually working on the rockets, because they're firing the rockets at London. So yeah, Kay and the RAFs that she's working with are basically trying to prevent that. I absolutely loved reading about Kay's job as a WAF, the calculations they had to do, and kind of the way it was structured and where they lived and things like that. I just absolutely loved all that. It does start off with her work as that in London and kind of the complicated relationships she has with some other people in the military. But yeah, I think they're such fascinating people to read about, and I always think of Coming Home by Rosamund Pilcher. Apart from in that case it was a wren, and that was my favourite part of that book, as rubbish as the end was. The end of this wasn't rubbish, I'm happy to say. I absolutely loved the ending. Because I enjoyed that so much, that definitely stuck in my head the most. But I also really did enjoy the German storyline. I thought it was really well done. It was so interesting to follow an engineer as opposed to somebody in the actual military, and kind of how he became involved in the program. There is that tension there when his team are trying to fire the rocket, and Kay is trying to predict them. So it was absolutely excellent. And I have to say, this was the very idea of what a perfect female-led book is for me. So I suppose, funny that it was written by a man, but I just thought it was such a really, really good story. The final line has to go to the author's note at the end with the historical note. I suppose I've heard of rockets, but I'm not that up on Second World War history. I didn't know about these V2 things specifically. The historical note said that they killed about 15,000 people in London and Antwerp, but also 20,000 slave labourers were killed building them, and it does show a scene of that in here, just a brief one, but it's just hard for the mind to comprehend those numbers really. But apparently a historian once described the V weapons program, which cost the German economy more dollar for dollar than the US spent on the Manhattan Project, as by a distance the greatest waste of resources by any combatant country in a supremely wasteful war. So just really, really shocking stuff, but a brilliant book, and I can't wait to read more Robert Harris, especially his Second World War stuff. Fatherland and Munich have been on my list for so long, so I will get to them at some stage. So another children's book, and this is a long term on my TBR for me, and that is Richard Adams's Watership Down. I love this cover, so I've attempted in my childhood to read it many, many times, and I'd say I probably got 3 or 4 chapters in and gave up, because it is so hard to believe that this is a children's book. It is so heavy, and it includes, it's long but also just really dense, and it includes several epigraphs in French without translations. So and it's not even that old. It was published in 1972. There were some really, really great elements in this book. I loved the descriptions of all the nature and the environments the rabbits are passing through, and the rabbits are anthropomorphized, but they still are very much rabbits, so you learn kind of a lot about how rabbits work. It's obviously really well researched, and also the impacts that humans can have on animal habitats was really I suppose striking to read about, and definitely would make you think more about rewilding and things like that. I loved all the rabbits' little personalities, and the names especially were so cute, like Buttercup and Fiver and Bigwig. A particular favourite of mine was probably Cowslip. I just think that's such a lovely name for a rabbit. So it starts off with basically this group of rabbits being forced to leave their warren because it kind of implies that diggers are going to build a new housing estate or something like that, and they go on this adventure to try and find a new rabbit warren. They probably don't move very far at all. They're very slow moving creatures, but they do kind of pass. They do try out several different warrens, and the different kind of atmosphere and organisation that there is in each of the warrens is really fascinating to read about. So apart from being heavy, the one other big criticism I have to give to this, and it's a little bit difficult really, because obviously rabbits society is the way it is, and this is probably, you know, the way that rabbits actually do act. But it was particularly troubling in a children's book to read the position of female rabbits in the warren. You know, all of the main characters that escape the warren are male rabbits, and they, you know, don't think about females for a while, but when they do think about the females, but eventually when they do start thinking about the long-term future of a new warren, they're like, oh, we'll need some female rabbits. You know, they lack female companionship, so yeah, and the females that are introduced aren't very interesting characters in the same way as the male rabbits are, but it probably is just of its age. But yeah, I don't know if I'd 100% recommend this book. It was a very heavy slog, but I'm really glad to have read it. So the memoir I mentioned is this one, Constellations by Sinéad Gleeson, and it has the subtitle Reflections from Life. So I would never have picked this up by myself. I suppose it was prompted by it being a book club pick from my in-life book club, and we decided we'd try something different, and this was the other book in that 3 for €10 offer that I mentioned, so it was just pure luck. I saw it there, really. It's kind of hard to put words on a memoir, really. But I think that what described it better than I could, really, is one of the reviews that was in the front. So Jenny Offal, author of Weather, says, these brilliant essays read of Gleeson has made a vow to her readers to illuminate what it means to live in a human body, for better or for worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, all the days of her life. And that probably does describe it best. Like, this is a lady that has had an awful lot of health issues from when her childhood. She had awful issues with her bones that caused her to spend long periods of time in hospital and on crutches and even in a wheelchair, and the difficulties that caused her. And also then she develops cancer. It is a very difficult read at times, but I just thought it was so beautifully written, and I actually did underline a good few bits of the book because I just was really particularly struck by how she put things, and some very difficult things I think are the things she describes the best. I actually flew through this. One of the chapters, there's this thing called the McGill Index, which has 77 words for pain and how to describe pain, and she writes kind of little poems, I suppose they are, like based on groupings of the words. And I particularly liked the one about scars. Sometimes they have teeth, a mouth sewn up with metal as though protesting, skin clamped to induce healing, or they are paper for shallow wounds. Medical thread thick as eyebrow hair, platelets march over the hill to the battle trenches of the body, an army of coagulation captains, working quickly until softness becomes a seam, a boundary wall on the body. It itches, yeah, like you wouldn't believe. You watch its progress, its possibility. Don't cough, it'll split. It pulls itself together. A gathered bow, pursed lips, a new pin dropped on your map. I really liked that one. Yeah, so basically very well written, and lady in my book club said that she wouldn't be into memoirs either, and though she didn't particularly enjoy this memoir either, she recognised how brilliant the writing was and would read her fiction. So yeah, if you do like memoirs and you think you'd be able for the heavy subject matter, and there is some very heavy stuff in this book, I would really recommend it. So nearly done. Second to last is Ghosts by Dolly Alderton. I inherited this book from somebody that was clearing out their house. I'd heard a lot about it on BookTube, and I always thought it wouldn't really be for me, and probably tellingly my sister saw me reading this book and she's like, oh, that doesn't look like a you book, Lisa, and it doesn't, but I absolutely thought this was so brilliant. I haven't listened to any of her podcasts or anything, but I absolutely loved the writing style. I thought it was so well written, and it was such a insight, I suppose. It is good for me to read books like this and on time, so I can get an insight into how horrific like online dating and stuff is. You kind of hear stories, but I don't know, some part of you doesn't really think it's real, and then you start hearing from all these different sources and you're like, wow, it must actually be that bad. So it follows this completely amazing character called Nina George Dean, who's in her early 30s, and she had a long-term boyfriend, but she is now broken up with the boyfriend, though they're still good friends, and the boyfriend has a new partner. So that comes into the book a lot, and the dynamic they have, but it mostly follows, as you'd probably guess from the title, her efforts with online dating to try and get a new partner, and so she eventually does meet this guy called Max, and everything is going really well, but it's probably not a spoiler to say that things don't go well after a while, and the kind of it was just heartbreaking, really. The shocking things that she had to go through with online dating. But it's not just about that. Like, there's so much else. It's about her relationship with her parents. Mother is significantly younger than her father, and her father has just started to develop dementia, and how they all deal with that, and just kind of the struggles of being like in your early 30s in the 21st century. I absolutely loved about this book. She's a really successful woman in everything else in life. Like, she owns her own flat, and she has a cookery book, and she's doing very well financially, and she has friends, especially I suppose one friend that also is going through the whole online dating game and the discussions they have about it. But she obviously just struggles with that area of her life, or is really scintillatingly accurate sometimes, I think. So yeah, that was just I just really love this book. And between that and Constellations, I actually another of the books that I picked up in that house was her two memoirs. So I'm a few stories into one of them, though I think it will be put on pause until the end of the Irish Readathon. But yeah, really recommend this book, and I think she has another book out. I definitely will be reading it when I get to it. So the final book I'm going to talk about today is something very different, and it's a book I have been reading for ages, just very slowly, and that's the GAA of People's History by Mike Cronin, Mark Duncan and Paul Rouse. So this is a perfect book really to dip in and out of, because it's a non-fiction, but it's those best type of non-fictions where there are loads of photos and diagrams and letters and things to accompany it, and it is such a brilliant, like, it's subtitled A People's History, and I think that describes it so well. Like, I have read some like biographies and things of GAA players that I would be familiar with, and it's always interesting to get that insight, but this obviously really appealed to me because it deals with every aspect of the GAA that you can think of from the time of its formation in 1884. GAA is the Gaelic Athletics Association, for anybody that doesn't know outside of Ireland. I like the history bits, are absolutely fascinating. Like, let's start with the name, the Gaelic Athletics Association. Like, it was just so fascinating the way it was founded. It was on the, like, obviously at the time Ireland is still part of the British Empire, and it was all very much born out of the idea of the Victorian sports revolution, and people kind of realizing the physical activity was good. And it says that like Maurice Davin, one of the founders, had like a little mini gymnasium in his home where he practiced weightlifting and used dumbbells and things to increase the power of his muscles. Like, you wouldn't really think of the Victorians doing that much, but it was all kind of ruled by these like British athletic associations. And it says that like some of the founders, so here it talks about Cusack, and it says the expansion of the British AAA rules to Ireland offended Cusack for several reasons. On matters of sporting taste, the British AAA were concerned more with running than with the weight throwing events, which Cusack believed more suited to the Irish character. Cusack was also irked that officially recognised athletic meetings were held on Saturdays, yet the traditional day for sport in rural Ireland was Sunday. And that the rules of the British AA narrowed to the range of athletes who could compete. So there was more focus on like the gentlemen amateurs in Britain, where in Ireland, you know, there wouldn't be that same body of people. So the GAA was mostly focused for like athletics, like throwing things and weightlifting and running and things like that, whereas now it's just synonymous with just hurling and football. So yeah, it was just really that really transformed very quickly at the start of the 1900s. So that was my favourite chapter. I just absolutely loved the history bit, and yeah, just the way things changed. Like Trinity College, the university I went to, that would very much be seen like not as a stronghold of GAA, more a stronghold of rugby and cricket and those kind of sports, but that was actually where the rules of the GAA were like codified. I just thought that was really fascinating. There are chapters on every other aspect of the GAA that you can think of, like how grounds are got, the politics, like the undeniable link, although it's supposed to be an apolitical organisation with nationalist ideas, religion, huge part until recently, hat flags and rosettes, and women in the GAA was also an excellent chapter, especially, as I say, the more historic one. Like I always, when I've been to the Croke Park Museum and you see the uniforms they used to wear for camogie with like the floral end skirts, the pictures just were an absolute highlight. So I really enjoyed this book, and it'll definitely be a reference book for me in years to come. So more modern times, look. But yeah, really brilliant. So anybody that's interested in the history of sport, I would definitely recommend this one. So yes, I think that's quite enough to be getting on with. So thanks so much for sticking with me through this long video, and yeah, hopefully I'll see you back here for loads more videos during the Irish Readathon. So yes, thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Thursday for my next video.